didn't sugarcoat it. We told them what it was. That diagnosis was incorrect, trying to learn how to walk and talk and sit up again.
Here with Alex. So I wanted to have a chat to Alex about sort of her story. She's got a little boy with brain cancer, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of just wanted to dive into his story, what it's like sort of juggling all of that with a couple of kids as well. So I'll hand over to you and let you sort of introduce yourself and explain your story a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm Alex. I have 4 kids. Henry is our third of 4 children, and last year in June he was diagnosed with brain cancer. It sort of came completely out of the blue. I'm told it's pretty typical for what he has, that it just has no sort of warning until it gets to the point where you just can't ignore it anymore. He was a very active 2-year-old boy, and we were actually playing at the park one day where he fell and hit his head. We went to the hospital after that, and we thought he had a concussion. A day later, it just got worse, and he was vomiting, could barely walk. We rushed him back where they did a CT, and they found that he had quite a large brain tumor, about the size of a mandarin, in his little 2-year-old head. And then 2 days later, he was having brain surgery, and they were thankfully able to remove it all. And then, basically from there, we've started our cancer journey, which is not something I ever thought that I would say or be doing or going through. He's treated up in Brisbane, and we're on the Gold Coast, so it's about an hour away from where we live, and we have our other 3 children at home. So our youngest was at the time 9 months old when Henry was diagnosed. So
that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a big juggle. I was still on maternity leave with my youngest, so thankfully didn't have to worry about work myself. My husband juggles full-time work and, caring for Henry as well, and spending time at the hospital with him too. So between my husband and I and my mum, we've sort of made it all work.
Yeah. Sort of just have to when that happens.
Yeah, that's right. You have no choice, and it's just been a whirlwind, really. We haven't had a chance to think about it, really. We just have to do it. We just have to, do all the things that we have to do, look after our other kids, and make it work. You don't really have a choice. Yeah.
So how old is he now then?
So Henry turns 3 next month.
Yeah.
On the 2nd. 3. Yeah. So it's been 7 months now since he was diagnosed. He spent the first 2 months in recovery from his surgery because it has given him something called posterior fossa syndrome, where he was essentially a newborn when he got out of surgery. For quite a few weeks, maybe 6 weeks, he was unable to hold his head up, couldn't chew or swallow, couldn't talk. Couldn't move his arms or legs. That just slowly has come back. So he's still unable to walk, but has gotten to the point where he can eat normally now. He's talking, his speech is impaired, but it's you can understand him and he can understand what we're saying, and he's just slowly trying to walk again. So doing all of that alongside also radiation treatment, chemotherapy treatment, which is it's quite full-on treatment that he's receiving as well. But in the back of all that, he's also trying to learn how to walk and talk and sit up again, and all the things that he could do 8 months ago.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
How did your other children sort of take it?
Yeah, so it was really hard. We waited. So when he had the fall at the park, they knew he was at hospital that day. And we, again, just thought it was a concussion. And so we didn't really tell them too much. And then when it turned out to be, a tumor and surgery and all that, we actually kept it from our 2 older girls who are 8 and 5, 7 and 4 at the time. They knew he was in hospital, but we didn't sort of elaborate for quite a while until we were given his diagnosis. So that was about 3 weeks. So 3 weeks of they couldn't see him because we couldn't video call him because it was quite graphic. He had bandages and drains in his head and things like that. So we just had to sort of tell them that, he's just recovering in hospital. He's okay. And So they were okay. And then we, with help from the OTs in the hospital, they made like a little book for him, that for the kids, that showed them sort of what, and explained it to them like a child could understand,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know, that he has cancer, that he's going to go through all these treatments. And we didn't sugarcoat it. We told them what it was, and what the different treatments he was getting would
Yeah.
be. And I think that's good, because they don't know what cancer is, so it's not
No.
scary to a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. But they, you know, they took it really well. They just wanted to see him, and they just wanted to know that he was okay. So once they could come and visit him, it was, you know, everything was fine for them, you know. But they do obviously feel the difference of not having my husband and I here all the time together. So for that first 8 weeks before he started chemo, and he was in hospital, my husband and I swapped every single day at the hospital. So we'd spend 24 hours at a time there with him, and my husband would work all day, and he'd come home and then drive up to the hospital and swap with me. And then I would spend the next day home with the kids. So if it weren't for my mum, she lives next door and she's incredible. She was there every night when we swapped. She was there with them during the day when they went at kindy. And yeah, it would be very, very, very difficult without my mum. She's been incredible. Yeah. I don't know how we would have done it without her.
No, that's amazing. Like, I was gonna say, like, the juggling of going back and forward, and even for the other kids as well.
Yeah. We've needed that third parent.
Yeah.
My mum has been the third parent.
Yeah.
You know, we needed that. We couldn't have done it otherwise.
Yeah. Have you noticed sort of like how much sort of time, I guess, do you spend between sort of hospital and home?
So in the very beginning, he was in hospital for 2 months. So yeah, and then after that, when he started chemo, his schedule was a week in hospital, and then it was 5 days in hospital, 2 days at home, 5 days in hospital, 2 days at home. We did that. It was a 3-week cycle. We did that twice. So we basically spent all the time in hospital. We came home for weekends if we're lucky, but often he was sick. And then we had a break because originally we were given a diagnosis 3 weeks after his surgery. And it turned out a few months later that diagnosis was incorrect, and he was given a new diagnosis, which was a much more rare cancer that they didn't actually pick up the first biopsy that they did. So yeah. So originally he was diagnosed with quite a common cancer, medulloblastoma, and the subcategory they gave him was a very good, the best prognosis you could possibly have. So we just felt like we had to get through the chemo, and then he would be fine. Yeah. 2 months after that diagnosis, a different biopsy that had gone away to a study came back and gave us a new diagnosis of something called ATRT, and it's much more rare, more aggressive, not really what we were expecting to hear. And so it changed his treatment plan. So we'd finished some chemo, and that new diagnosis changed our treatment plan, and we started radiation. So he was never originally going to have any radiation. So we'd spent 6 weeks then doing radiation up in Brisbane as outpatient, so not actually admitted into the hospital. Mm-hmm. And every weekday, Monday to Friday, he would go under general anaesthetic and get radiation, and then we would drive him home or stay up there at the Ronald McDonald House, depending on how we felt. And yeah, so we did that for 6 weeks straight. That was a lot. It was a lot of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and driving up to Brisbane, and fasting him every day. We'd have to fast him, so not let him eat any breakfast. And then
the child kind of doesn't understand why.
Very hard for a 2-year-old to not eat and not understand why they can't eat. So we finished that. That was, it actually was, aside from all of that, more pleasant than chemo, because he had no side effects whatsoever. You wouldn't even know that he had it. And then we had a little bit of a break just before Christmas, and then just before Christmas, the week before, we started a new high-dose chemotherapy, which is 3 to 4 weeks in hospital. But he actually smashed it out in just under 3 weeks. So we did our first round, and we're about to start our second round on Monday. So we spend a lot of time in hospital, like a lot. And if we're not at the Brisbane hospital, if we're at home and he gets any sort of temperature, we have to race into our local hospital where we usually end up spending a couple of nights as well. So a lot of time in hospital. We've gotten used to the hard beds that they have there.
Oh, right. Even just like mentally as a parent, that has got to be just one
You
of the
don't
hard
have
things.
any I don't know, I feel like we're just doing it because we have no choice. We know that there is no other option, so we just do it. No time to dwell on, how hard it is. I think one day we're going to look back on it and maybe have a little bit of a mentee bee, as they say, mental breakdown. But at this point, we're just doing it.
You just sort of run on adrenaline until
until it's all done. Yeah. So once he finishes treatment, he's looking to finish treatment in March. And from there, we're just deciding on whether or not there'll be any other sort of maintenance treatment that we'll do maybe from home. And then if not, it'll just be regular scans from then and hope that nothing ever comes back.
Yeah, that's the scariest part.
It is. It's a really scary thought to be finished treatment as well, and not have anything there stopping it from coming back.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And the other thing I sort of wanted to talk about as well, in terms of, like, obviously, you mentioned your husband's got a full-time job and then you're on maternity leave and that sort of thing at the time, but what's the expense sort of like as I mean, as a family, that's got to be a lot of expense going through.
I follow a lot of different people, a lot of other families going through similar situations, and a lot of them, like there's a lot that I follow that are overseas, and I'm honestly, it makes me so, so grateful that we live here because, in America, for example, like medical treatment, here we are so fortunate because we actually don't pay for his medical treatment. Like everything that he gets in the hospital is covered, thankfully. It surprised me to learn, like, we have private health insurance, and it surprised me to learn in the very beginning that you can't use it. Like, that we go to we go to a public hospital because that's where all the doctors are that specialize in these things. I wouldn't be able to take him to just a normal private hospital and treat him using our private health cover because all the experts are at the big children's hospital that we're in. So there's no cost. The biggest cost when we go to the hospital is probably the parking. There's a lot of organizations and charities and stuff that help, especially the oncology families. There's a lot of driving up and back for us as well, about an hour each time we drive up to the hospital. But one of the harder things would be that I can't physically go back to work because my job is an in-person job. So I haven't been able to return to work from my maternity leave at this point. And even once Henry's finished treatment, there's a lot of rehab that he'll be doing. And I couldn't put him in kindy knowing that he can't walk. So, return to work's not really an option just yet for me. And we are a two-income family normally. So that's sort of one thing that has impacted us. But, so many generous people and organizations out there, it's helped us a lot. But I'm just always really grateful for the medical care that we have here. I've said it from the beginning, like it's astounding to see everything that he gets and just know the cost behind it all, but know that it's not put onto us. And I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at some people in America and places like that.
It puts them,
puts them into bankrupt.
Definitely. I've seen stories where people have had to, give up their children even because they can't pay the bills, so they have to give them up to the state to pay for their medical care. It's horrendous.
Absolutely awful. Yeah, pretty thankful for living in Australia.
Yes. Yeah. And I do believe he's getting the best care. He gets the most amazing care. The team he has is incredible. So very
That's so
thankful
good.
for him.
And it was
Yeah.
Brisbane Children's.
Brisbane, yeah, it's called the Queensland Children's Hospital that we go
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, interesting. And what's like even obviously him being that young, like children are so really resilient,
Oh,
right? Like,
incredibly. Yeah.
I think if you put like I think about if I went through something like that or
Yes.
even another adult, it's just
Yes.
I don't think you'd have the same.
No. He is just a 2-year-old that
Yeah.
wants to do 2-year-old things, like in, a body of a boy that's going through chemotherapy and, has had major brain surgery.
Mm.
But his last chemo round, where I've seen, lots of kids that are bedbound and on morphine drips and, unable to move because they're in so much pain. He was doing laps around the ward on his trike, like every day, like, getting his exercise in
Yeah.
and full of energy. So, yeah, it's just so resilient and he's so determined. He just, he'll walk again, I know, because he wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Oh, that's
He's
so
just
good.
one of those really active kids and he puts up with so much, like, the daily, they change his dressing and that hurts, but he does it and he deals with it. He was getting daily injections.
Mm.
Before all of this, I remember dreading every time I had to take my 4-year-old to get their immunizations. You think, oh gosh, how am I going to give them this needle?
Yeah.
And how going to react? And he's getting every single day, getting a needle in his leg to help his counts
Yeah.
recover.
It just
And
becomes normal for them, doesn't it?
yeah, it's terribly normal for him now.
Which is
It's
sad to
awful.
say,
It's,
but yeah. Yeah. Wow, they're so
the kids are amazing. The kids really, they're so resilient. Something I read recently, it's 1 in 5 children will not survive childhood cancer. So, but there's so much to that. There's so many different kinds.
yeah.
We talk about childhood cancer like it's one thing, but it's not. There's brain cancers, there's blood cancers, there's sarcomas, it's such a broad spectrum, but we talk about childhood cancer like it's one cancer, but we don't talk about adult cancer in the same way.
Yes.
It's brain cancer, it's breast cancer, it's all the other ones, but they're just it's very much lumped together when we're talking about children. But I'm not sure how it works in Australia. I was trying to work it out, but I know in America they are given 3.8% of the whole budget towards cancer research goes to children. So in America, they say that their children are worth more than 4, which is more than 4% of the whole budget of childhood cancer of cancer research. So
yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, so when they're looking at what their government puts towards cancer research, 4% is all that is given to the children. So, and that's every childhood cancer, not and
That's 4%. Yeah.
Yeah, we should be definitely prioritizing our children, but
yeah,
fortunately, it doesn't always work that way, and that affects us too because research, no matter where in the world, research is research. So, the more people researching, the better. It benefits everyone.
Yeah, 100%. All right, I didn't know that figure.
Yes, I know. A lot of people probably don't know that figure. I don't know what our figure is here, but just in general, like, you think about the amount of money that must go to cancer research in America. That affects us too, because if they find a cure for a cancer over there, we're going to get it here too. So
yeah. Every country is the same when it comes to research, really.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It's a whole thing you don't really always know about until you're in it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, sort of looking from the outside, you see sort of a sick child kind of thing, but you don't actually understand
I know. I didn't.
All the levels that go into it. It's too much. Has he sort of had like much of a? Does it impact him much? I know you said like he sort of just is determined to get going, and
I hope not. I really do. It's hard to sort of tell. It all seems to just sort of, he goes with the flow and he just sort of does it. I'm hoping that it's just going to be one of those really faint memories that he doesn't even really remember. I'm
Yeah.
hoping he's just at that beautiful age where he'll forget it all, but
Yeah.
it's really hard to know. He's not. I hear of a lot of kids that, the second you walk into a room with a white coat or scrubs on, they panic because they are aware. But he doesn't seem to be worried. Like, we go to the hospital and he's happy there. I hope that we make it fun for him where we can, so that it's not, a dreadful thing for him. And he loves his doctor and his nurses, and at this point, he seems pretty good with it all. So I hope it stays that way. I hope we haven't traumatized him for life.
No, it's good. It's kind of, a bit of a
Mm.
in-between age.
Yeah, hopefully.
Is this sort of like, even when you got like the diagnosis and stuff, do they mention anything about, like, you don't really hear of much development and that sort of thing with treatments, and do they sort of give you much hope around that, or?
So a lot of it is what I research myself, and when I say research, Google. I'm a big Googler. So when we got his first diagnosis, the one that turned out to be incorrect, it did have a really, really successful prognosis. It had a very good prognosis. It was one that they didn't anticipate would ever recur and never come back. So we were quite positive about that. The new diagnosis is being more rare, and it is more of an aggressive type. It's a little bit more unknown because being so rare, when I say rare, there's, I'm in a Facebook group with 1,400 other people. So, and we see people added into that group every day. So, it's rare, but it's happening. Because of the rareness of it, it's not as researched and not as funded. And it's a newer strain, a newer type. So for a long time, it was misdiagnosed, like Henry was, as a medulloblastoma. And so they think probably for years there were kids that had it that were being treated as medulloblastoma because they didn't have the technology to diagnose it properly. The reason Henry was misdiagnosed was it was originally biopsied locally, and we were given the results, but it was inconclusive, the biopsy, and so we were given basically the most likely diagnosis rather than a scientific diagnosis. So we had the opportunity at the same time as that to send it off to a research study. I didn't see why we wouldn't do that, so we did, and that is called AIM Brain, and it's funded by charities like Kerry's Beanies for Brain Cancer and multiple other charities that sort of fund these studies. So it went to that study, and it's called methylation profiling. So they did that on his tumor, and that's where we got his correct diagnosis. So without sending that off to a research study, we wouldn't have had the correct diagnosis, and he would have been very severely undertreated for what he had. And, that's catastrophic. You need to treat it as it is. And so thankfully, since then, so in the last 6 months, that study has been accredited and now will be available to every child without question that comes in with a brain tumor. Obviously, it obviously gives a much more accurate diagnosis and gives more information about their particular tumor, which is helpful in treating it. So, it's really these research studies that are giving people hope. So it's the funding of those that helps, really. Without that study, we would be thinking we had the best prognosis of the most common cancer for children in their brain.
Turn around in your face later.
So I'm really happy to hear that that's now something that every child with a brain tumor in Australia and New Zealand will have access to immediately. And would be a much quicker turnaround time. It was 3 months before we found out his correct diagnosis, which is just not long enough. It's too long to wait to get a correct diagnosis. So that will be, kids will come in with a brain tumor now and get accurate diagnoses straight away. So
that is so good to hear.
So to answer your question, Henry's type, the ATRT tumours, they have a 5-year survival rate of about 30%. So that would be based on the fact that it's newer, it's less researched. The treatments have changed over the years, and there are better treatment options now, but they're still bit of a guess sometimes. There's subgroups to his type of cancer, but they know what they are, but they don't know what they mean because they haven't been researched properly. So they're not treated to the best of their ability, and that's all down to funding. So it's crazy. Yeah.
Funding, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Definitely.
No, it's literally all you can really do. I mean, for our point of view is raising awareness for it and giving to charities, that sort of thing, but kind of the government's
yeah.
Wow. But yeah, that is super interesting. Thank you so much for sharing his story and everything. But I definitely hope that things improve. But I sort of wanted to dive into as well. I know you obviously have your co-owner of the Mini Co.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to sort of hear about that. I know she sort of do kids clothing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, like is it little dolls clothing and that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I sort of wanted to dive a little bit into that and hear your story behind that. What got you into that? And
it's actually something we sort of fell into. So I co-own with my mum. My mum is actually the talent. She makes so anything that's handmade in our business, my mum makes. She's very talented. So a couple of years ago, I was on maternity leave with baby Henry, and the pandemic had hit, and we were just, stuck at home, had my newborn, and I was heading back to work soon, and Mum really just wanted something as a little hobby, and we were talking about little things that she could do. She's an amazing sewer. She crochets, she does all the things, and we were trying to put her skills to use, and I said, well, let's start you a little business. And the intent was always just to have a little business for Mum to do in her spare time. And at the same time, the mini cane dolls and Miniland dolls were such a huge craze, and they seemed to be so big and nobody could get the clothes. So we sort of fell into doing clothes for them, and it was at the time quite big, and it sort of took off really quickly, and I feel like we fell into it. Like it wasn't sort of what we had intended to begin with, but we really loved it. It was kind of fun. It was something at the time not a whole heap of people were doing. And so, we just started making dolls' clothes, and that sort of branched out. We started stocking the dolls and the tiny Harlow accessories, if you've seen those, that she does all the beautiful little food jars and bottles and things for the dolls. And, of course, we had to make matching kids' clothes so that you could match your doll. And, it just sort of grew and grew. I went back to work. The day we launched the business, I went back to my full-time job, working in retail, and had my small third child as well, still at home. And we just sort of did it on the side, bit of fun for us. It's a little hobby of ours. We love it still. We haven't stopped even through Henry's diagnosis. We still shipping orders regularly. Mom has learnt how to pick and pack and shipping labels and stuff from home as well. And, I direct from the hospital. It's just been something that sort of grew and blossomed in my spare time, Mom's spare time. She looks after my kids a lot as well when I'm at work or in the hospital. And it's just something we really love doing. And I'm really glad we kind of had that in the background as well. It's a good
distraction.
For sure. And then last year also, through sort of my love of taking all the photos for our little business, I started my own little business doing product photography as well, just another little fun thing on the side. And I just started doing that when Henry was diagnosed. So that also kept me really busy in the early days too.
One of those super mums. It's got everything.
Just doing a little bit of everything here and there. Yeah.
That's cool. I've looked at like 3 page and stuff. Absolutely beautiful. Love it. Very
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah, talking about sort of kids' clothes and stuff, the last sort of thing that I wanted to even ask about is um with your little boy like having cancer and that sort of thing, having, tubes, a feeding tube. Do you find it difficult at all with clothing in terms of what suits
What?
him if you've got like a pack on or what's comfortable for him?
Yeah. Um, it is hard to find things that sort of are medically suited for these sorts of things. He does have a CVL, so that comes through his chest, and they sort of hang down from
Yeah,
his. I think we were lucky, probably in his age, that he was just sort of the cutoff where I could still put a romper on him. So I'd pop a romper on him, which secured them a little bit, so that his baby brother couldn't pull on them, when they're playing.
yeah,
Um, but then they're not accessible, so that's not sort of ideal when we're at the hospital. Yeah, it is hard to find sort of something like that that would put them away where they can't be tugged on or anything, but still easy access. Um, but yeah, we just sort of had to improvise.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
Gonna
he
have
has his feeding tube as well. His brother's pulled that out twice now. So, yeah,
this.
I know it's a bit rough. He
Doesn't
doesn't
sound
want
comfortable.
to. It's not nice, but it's not nice getting it back in. He has to get it back in when he does that. But yeah,
Is that
that's sort of.
so he would have to go and get that put back in?
Yeah, well, so he pulled it out 2 days ago, and we've left it out this time because he's able to eat now. Like in the
Yeah,
early days, he had no ability to eat himself, so we needed it. Now we're a little bit more relaxed where he can eat himself at home, and he's happy to take his meds. If he had meds that he wouldn't take, we'd have to go put it back in so that we
yeah,
can put his meds down it. So we've just left it out for now, give him a bit of a break.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thought of it.
I know, and, no matter how close to his nose you tape it, those little tiny baby fingers just hook in there and pull it out.
They can get anything. They literally.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
No, that is it's kind of opened my eyes even.
Yes, and it's you don't really, I've seen photos of kids, with the feeding tubes and things. You just don't sort of understand until you have to live with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's kind of like the reaction with um other people seeing him? Like if you
Uh,
is it
yeah.
positive or negative or
Um, Look, it's really hard. I sort of go back and forth between like I don't want people to look at him and pity him,
yeah,
like we're out at the shops, but then at the same time, I don't want people to, you know, maybe make a big deal out of it.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We probably have only had one real incident where I was a bit ready to. Just an old man one day lining up for Santa just before Christmas. He came up to me and he said, "What's wrong with him?" And I just thought, "What's wrong with you?" So,
yeah,
but most people would be more empathetic. I think this man was a bit blunt for my liking. But I suppose he's got quite a large scar on the back of his head, so it's not. We don't hide it away. We don't pretend that it hasn't happened. We're proud of him, if anything, and how he
definitely.
has fought through it all, and to see him trying to walk or riding his bike and things like that, it's just something that we're just purely proud of. So
Like
we want people to,
yeah,
yeah,
watching
yeah.
milestones again every day.
Yeah, it is. It's like, honestly, it was like having him as a newborn again and watching him do every single thing all over again.
Yeah,
And as awful as it was also a joy. Like every time he did something new, like in the very beginning when he just moved his hand for the first time, I screamed and ran out to the nurses and jumped for joy with them, to say that he could move again, because we just didn't know if he ever would.
yeah,
Um, and then it was just one by one, all the things. Then he started talking again, and the first time he said "mum" again, and
yeah,
it is really like living his first year all
yeah.
over again.
Which is
Yeah,
quite special in a way.
It is. It's, you don't often get to do that twice. So
Yeah,
if we want to take something good from it, it's that.
yeah, definitely. Got to try and always look at the positive side of it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, so in terms of like his diagnosis, that sort of thing,
Mm.
um, is there anything more you'd like to add, or is there any way that people can sort of support your small business to support him? And
Look, I've got some beautiful friends, and they set up a little GoFundMe for us, which was incredible and has helped us immensely. And just the support of small businesses, and my kids had three of them had birthdays in September/October last year, and so many people came together to put on an amazing birthday for them so that they could have this special day after everything that they've gone through as well, because it's a lot for them. I do feel very blessed to have so many people around us. In terms of his diagnosis, it's more things like research. It's purely research. It's needed to to help all these other kids, because they're getting diagnosed every day.
yeah,
And the more we can research it and fund the research, the better. Yeah, that's really the biggest thing, I think. But the only thing that I would ask for is research, funding of research. If anyone wants to help, if you are someone who has a friend or a relative or anyone that you know that is affected by childhood cancer, probably one of the most, important things you could do for them is to help fund research, because that's what's probably lacking. Yes, make them a meal and take it to their house so they don't have to feed their kids the next day, or, do the little things for them too. But if you really, really want to make a huge impact, it's if everyone came together and helped fund the research.
yeah,
Because our kids as well, they're going through chemo treatments that are outdated. They're not designed for children. They're designed for adults. There's
yeah.
no specific chemo that is for children. Um, yeah,
That's
there's
interesting.
there's got to be a better way. Some of the chemo drugs that Henry is on, and he's been through maybe 8 different drugs, I think now, of chemo. One of them, a couple of them actually, cause hearing loss. So it's very well known to cause high frequency hearing loss, but we
That's obviously
don't
not
have.
a permanent thing, is it?
Yeah, yeah, it's permanent. It causes them to have permanent hearing loss. Like for Henry, we just did his second hearing scan test, and it's looking like maybe he is starting to have a little bit of high frequency hearing loss. At this point, it doesn't affect normal speech levels, but it could. And if that happened, he would need hearing aids, and it wouldn't be, it's not a temporary loss. It's permanent,
Yeah,
unfortunately. But they're the things that we have to sacrifice, for him to get these treatments. These treatments are brutal. They're not, they're outdated. They're not, some cause heart problems, and some cause liver problems, and
and they kind of
some of
just
the
sorry.
some of sorry they get through treatment and then they survive their cancer, but then they're hit with so many problems later in life that's caused from the chemo, because they're just not up to date. They're not researched enough. They haven't found new, better ways to treat them without causing all these other side effects at the same time.
Yeah, it always shocks me, and I know this is probably a crazy thing to say, but um, like the chemo and stuff that they use, it's almost a bit of a business as well. Like they make a lot of money out of using the chemo that they
Sure.
use.
Yeah.
And yeah, it shocks me that you can send someone to the moon, but you can't cure cancer.
There's got to
Yeah,
be more, that
but
can be
yeah,
done.
why is that budget not going somewhere
Yeah,
else?
exactly.
Part of it anyway.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, the key, research funding is definitely the key, and it's probably one of the best gifts that you could give to someone who's facing a child with cancer. If you want to help your friend or your relative or your neighbor who's going through it, you know, donations.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put a link up at the end of this for anyone that wants to donate. Even, yeah, I'll put your GoFund page up, and we'll put some donation pages up for links to fundraising, and everyone can definitely chip in. It just, I mean, to someone like myself that hasn't been directly impacted by it opens your eyes just talking to someone that has, because you just don't, you think, oh yeah, he's got cancer, he's going through treatment.
Yeah. You honestly, you wouldn't know. No one would know. You know, you wouldn't understand. I never did until you actually are there going through it every day, holding their hand. So the day that Henry fell at the park, when he fell and hit his head the day before everything started, I remember sitting there at the park, and someone had asked me, messaged my Instagram and said, can you share this ball that they were doing for the Starlight Foundation? No, Make-A-Wish Foundation. Oh, yeah. And so I shared it on my page, and I remember sitting there. I can vividly remember sitting there in the park, sharing this and looking at my kids, because I had both my boys with me. And I remember thinking, gosh, I'm so glad that I've never, ever needed Make-A-Wish Foundation. And yeah, he fell within maybe 20 minutes of me sharing that. And from there, this whole thing started. And, you know, it was only a few weeks later that we were told that he would get to make a wish. So it's just like, you honestly just don't know.
You don't know what's around the corner. Yeah.
You don't. And you really, I think, maybe don't know how lucky you are until you're faced with something, you know, like this.
It's almost like, it's a crazy way that happened, but it's almost a blessing that he fell that day.
It sure is a blessing. Like, I only look at it as a blessing. He was meant to fall that day. He was chasing the birds, and he was meant to fall. It had been a few weeks of me thinking something was just not quite right. But it just wasn't, and it just didn't, it was so subtle. Everything that happened was so subtle. And yeah, until he fell that day, you just, you know, you wouldn't have noticed, really. No one on the outside would have thought there was anything wrong, but you know, your mum's guts just going, something's not quite right. But yeah, even to the point where they were doing his CT scan, and he was obviously unwell at that time. Like, he was in and out of consciousness, and he was vomiting, and he was weak, and they did a CT scan, and I still was just like, wow, this is a really bad concussion. Like, it was still never even a thought in my mind that it could have been anything different.
You don't ever think the worst?
No. Well, I do now, I can tell you. Now, the first thing my mind ever goes to, but it certainly wasn't then. You just, never expect it to be your story.
Yeah. No. Well, that is so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing his story, given your story, and one strong woman. It's my take from this, with everything that you do.
Have no choice. We just,
Yeah. You just keep going.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, I definitely sure hope that his treatment is successful and he gets better from here. There's no return. Yes. How much longer is the treatment for him?
We're hoping finishing in the first week of March, all going well. Yeah.
Very good. No,
it's just around the corner.
Got to get through the next couple of months.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. No, I definitely hope that everything goes well for him, and Thank you so much for sharing his story.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to listen, because I ramble, but
No, it's good. It's very interesting, very eye-opening to hear even just the details
yeah.
that we don't see from the outside. So I
Well,
think,
I it's helpful.
yeah, I think it will help a lot of people to realize how important it is for research.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's something we love to do as a company, is to be able to, give back to, especially children, being a
Yes.
children's clothing company, being
Yes.
able to give back in terms of charity is so important, and it's definitely something we should all do.
It's incredible.
But yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Joe.